listener production.
From the briefing team,
This is The Beefing.
Hey, it's Helen Smith here. Welcome to The Beefing. Today's beef is Georgie Purcell versus horse racing. Let's get into it. Georgie Purcell is a Victorian politician and fierce animal rights advocate. And back in November 2022, she was elected as the Animal Justice Party member of the Legislative Council for Northern Victoria. And since being elected, she's been advocating for changes within the horse racing industry. Now, Victoria is considered to be the home of racing in Australia, and the Melbourne Cup is known as the race that stops the nation. And the race itself is an annual Group 1 thoroughbred horse race at Flemington Racecourse. And Georgie says it represents the worst parts of our society. Animal cruelty, gambling harm, rising rates of family violence, and it's not something that anyone should want to be a part of or be contributing their money to. Having this to say about this year's spring racing season.
This report is a compilation of the deaths of horses on Australian racetracks for the last racing year, and it is shocking. The death toll is a whopping 175 horses. That's one death every 2 days. Animal racing industries say a lot about making racing safer, that tracks are getting better, and that less animals are dying. This couldn't be further from the truth because this report shows the death rate has actually increased. In fact, it is one of the deadliest years on record. Some of the causes of deaths for racehorses include being impaled, heart attack, severe head trauma, severe mouth trauma, internal bleeding, and broken bones.
And that number is up from the previous year's Death Watch report, with Georgie telling the briefing back in November 2024 that on-track deaths from the 2024 racing year was 151. Now, to give you a bit of background about the industry, it generates around $9.5 billion a year, with 51% of that, or $4.8 billion, generated in regional Australia. And it employs between 75,000 to 80,000 people, from jockeys to stable hands. Australia has 387 major race clubs, with New South Wales and Victoria making up around 60% of those. And thousands of racehorses are bred by the racing industry every year with the hopes of creating the next winner. But many of them never even make it to the racetrack. And the majority of racehorses have a short racing career, which is only around 2 to 3 years, despite the fact that these horses were bred specifically for that purpose. And many of those 175 racehorses that died this year were not fully developed.
37% of the 175 horses killed on Australian racetracks were also raced as 2-year-olds before their bodies are fully developed, and even more started trialling at that age. You'd think with all the evidence showing that horses shouldn't be raced before their bodies are fully developed would stop the industry from doing this. But of course, it's not about welfare. Racing horses as babies increases the chances of making a profit sooner.
Georgie has called the industry the most visible display of animal cruelty and pointed out how the industry is exempt from specific animal welfare laws, which the RSPCA has confirmed, saying there are no mandatory welfare standards for racehorses. Therefore, legal protection is limited to the minimum requirements under state-based animal welfare legislation, whereas other areas like farming and animal research have specified welfare standards which must be adhered to. Now, Georgie's been advocating to stop the whip with one of her catchy slogans, "Whips are for foreplay, not for horseplay." And she's also been pushing to stop jumps racing, which continues still in Victoria, even though it has ended in every other state and territory and has been shown to kill horses at a far higher rate than that of flat racing. Now, in June 2025, Georgie put up an adjournment matter for the Minister for Racing, asking for a formal review into the death of racehorse Treasured Crown, who was killed in a jumps race following a catastrophic leg injury. Now, Treasured Crown did not even last a single year as a jumps horse before he was killed, and he had an undisclosed prior embargo and 2 significant racing breaks known as spells during his career, which Georgie argued was a clear indication that he had sustained a serious injury before his avoidable death, saying that there were obvious red flags, but he returned to high-risk jumps races, which Georgie wants banned.
Queensland stopped jumps racing in 1903, Western Australia in 1941, New South Wales in 1997, and South Australia in 2022. And yet we stay behind as the only state in the entire country killing horses at breakneck speed for gambling profits. Victoria's 2025 jumps racing season finally came to an end on the weekend, and 5 horses were killed. It was the first season after our state's 8th independent review into jumps racing in our state. This review was initiated after the last day of the 2024 season was the deadliest day in our history, killing 3 horses and seriously injuring 2 jockeys. At that time, I joined with former Labor Racing Minister Rob Hulls to say enough is enough. But appallingly, Racing Victoria chose to continue with the blood sport.
Now, Racing Victoria claimed to have implemented safety upgrades this season, including modified jumps, stricter eligibility criteria, and mandatory competency trials. And Racing Australia, which regulates the Australian thoroughbred breeding and racing industry, has said it follows the world's best practice standards of integrity and animal welfare. But Georgie says these so-called safety measures are failing the very horses they are meant to protect. And the current season was supposed to reflect improved safety standards, but instead, the statistics tell a very different story. Now, while Georgie is calling for some bans within horse racing, she also acknowledges that racing is not just going to stop because it generates a lot of profit and provides jobs. Instead, ahead of this year's Melbourne Cup, Georgie says her focus is now on welfare changes within the industry and retirement plans for horses, having this to say on 3AW.
I don't think any animal should be used for the purpose of gambling. I would prefer it if horse racing didn't exist, but I'm also realistic and I'd love to see the industry make some changes that they could make that other countries have done.
Now, a lot of pro-horse racing voices argue that these horses are looked after better than most humans, and they'd be right, getting thousands of dollars worth of treatments like acupuncture and laser therapy. And Georgie has said multiple times that there's no denying that these horses are very well looked after, having grown up with horses and having some of her own. But it's what happens to them once they stop racing that needs people's attention.
Where my concern comes in is when they're no longer racing, when they're no longer profitable, when they're no longer useful to that trainer, and where they end up. And that's when we see them discarded at sale yards, knackeries, in backyards where they're not receiving the right care. These animals are an investment for them, and the best investment is the best cared for one. But on top of that, you cannot remove the risks that come with putting them on the racetrack. And even the best racehorses can still break a leg, they can still snap their neck, and then they're killed.
There are many reasons horses may be rejected from the racing industry. It could be poor performance, illness, injury, or behavioural problems. And a proportion of healthily retired horses will become breeding, recreational, or equestrian sport horses, while others will be sent to knackeries or abattoirs to be slaughtered. But the exact destination of horses leaving the racing industry is unknown, as accurate information is not available. Now, Georgie's beef with the horse racing industry goes beyond the animals. It includes gambling harm and family violence, and she says the industry is losing their social licence and have a lot of work to do to prove to us that they deserve the right to exist and continue to operate under the current circumstances. And while she's fighting for changes within the sport, recent numbers coming from inside the racing industry report that they've actually seen a rise of young people attending some of its biggest events, with these young people accounting for up to 2/3 of those numbers. So while there have been some positive changes in some states, this beef is far from over. But that's it for today's beefing on Georgie Purcell versus horse racing. If you like this episode, we'd love you to subscribe or follow wherever you're listening from. It's a really easy way you can help support everything we do here at The Briefing. And send us your beefs. What would you like us to break down next? You can also check us out on Instagram at The Briefing Podcast and on YouTube. I'm Helen Smith. Catch you next time.